In the late 1980s, the Jamaican bobsled team became a sensation. And why not? A country known for sun, beaches, and reggae, sending a team to the Winter Olympics to race down an icy track? It's the stuff of Hollywood, right? And it actually did inspire a movie. Almost 40 years later, the Jamaican bobsled team is still at it. But the new generation doesn't want to be a curiosity. They want to medal. We meet them at the track in Lake Placid on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street Plaza, Glens Falls. And the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition, seeking volunteers aged 55 plus to support family caregivers in northern and central New York. Visit nyscrc/AmeriCorps.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, February 17th. First up, many and perhaps most workers on dairy farms in the North Country and across New York State are working without legal papers. Farms are starting to think about what might happen amidst a crackdown on undocumented immigrants. Rebecca Rettelmeyer reports for the New York Public News Network.
New York dairy farms operate year-round, and they need staff to keep things going. For years, many have relied on workers from Mexico and Guatemala, says Richard Stupp, director of the Agricultural Workforce Development Program at Cornell University.
In many cases, there's a decades-long connection between those farms in upstate New York and those villages in Guatemala and southern Mexico, where they've been going back and forth for decades.
But some of those workers may not be able to continue working on New York's dairy farms. President Donald Trump has called for federal authorities to ramp up the number of migrants they arrest and deport. Stupp has been helping farms in New York plan and prepare for what might come.
If you lose your workforce, what do you do? If you're a parent and you get detained, what do you do? Who's got your contact information? Does the farm have the emergency contact information to be able to help out and reach any relatives and things like that?
So far, Stupp says he's only heard of immigration officials approaching farms in New York looking for individuals with criminal records. But if they begin to raid farms to arrest any unauthorized workers, Stupp says New York's dairy farms will struggle.
That can have a significant impact on farms in terms of how do they get the cows milked, how do they do their basic operations, and it can be disastrous.
Stupp says one solution could be expanding the H-2A visa program, which allows employers to hire foreign workers for temporary agricultural jobs. Currently, jobs are only eligible if they last for 10 months or less. In Ithaca, I'm Rebecca Rettelmeyer for the New York Public News Network.
New York's top money manager warns that the governor's budget is vulnerable to potential cuts from the Trump administration. Comptroller Tom DiNapoli also wants the legislature to scrutinize some of the governor's affordability proposals. Jung-Yoon Han has that story for the New York Public News Network.
In any given year, about 40% of the state's funding comes from the federal government. That mainly goes towards the state's most expensive program, Medicaid, along with other initiatives related to nutrition and transportation. But State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli says in an analysis published Friday that those funding streams could stand to change and shrink with President Donald Trump in the White House. While the state does have rainy day reserves for emergencies, DiNapoli says Governor Kathy Hochul's budget proposal could have better prepared for potential funding cuts.
There's a lot of uncertainty here, but I would have thought it might have been a smarter strategy to have another kind of reserve built in to try to buffer some of what we think may be coming out of Washington.
He also says the state legislature should look into some of the governor's affordability proposals. One of Hochul's ideas is to issue one-time inflation rebate checks of up to $500 for qualifying individuals. The funds for the checks come from a $3 billion surplus.
$3 billion is a lot of money, and there's certainly other things you could do with that money, either in terms of funding some of the programs that are being proposed or using some of it to pay down debt could be another approach. Look, at the end of the day, that's not part of our responsibility, but I do think it is fair for the legislature, as part of their negotiation with the governor, to really debate whether or not that makes the most sense.
The deadline to approve the state budget is April 1st. In Albany, I'm Jung-Yoon Han for the New York Public News Network.
Dozens of bobsled teams have been training at the Olympic sliding track in Lake Placid this winter. Few have a history like the Jamaican team, which has been coming to the Adirondacks for almost 4 decades. David Escobar reports on a new generation of Jamaican bobsledders chasing their country's first Winter Olympic medal.
Before their first Olympic race in 1988, the Jamaican bobsled team had trained for just 6 months. Part of that training happened at Mount Van Hoevenberg, home to a sliding track renovated for the 1980 Games. But there was a problem. Team members had nowhere to practice the push start for their 4-man sled.
The only thing I could come up with, I borrowed a buddy's truck and we took our 4-man down to the toboggan chute on the ice there and we were pushing on the lake.
That's Pat Brown, a former Olympic bobsledder who coached the original Jamaican team in the late 80s. They became fan favorites at the Calgary Olympics and later inspired the Disney film Cool Runnings.
Feel the rhythm! Feel the rhyme! Get on up! It's bobsled time! Cool Runnings!
The movie is mostly fictional but contains some truth. Back then, the Jamaican bobsled team trained with makeshift sleds held together with duct tape and sold t-shirts to cover expenses. Today's team looks a lot different. Since arriving in January, they've been digging their cleats into a state-of-the-art ice house at Mount Van Hoevenberg. Audra Segri watches team members dressed in sleek black bodysuits push a sled along an icy track. She was the brakewoman for Jamaica's first women's Olympic bobsled team and became the team's manager in 2024.
I would say I like where the program is heading. And granted, we have a lot to work on, but it's good to say we have a start.
Segri and Brown say the goal is for Jamaican bobsled to earn its first Olympic medal within the next 10 years. Getting there requires experience and qualification points at races around the world.
Sled in from start 1. This is Shane Pitter and Tyreek Buckner of Team Jamaica. They need a downtime.
Tyreek Buckner is part of the 2-man sled competing at the North American Cup in Lake Placid. Like many of his teammates, he didn't grow up bobsledding. He played football before switching to the sport 2 years ago. The transition hasn't been easy.
It's something that looks easy when you watch it on film, but when it comes on to doing it, it takes a lot of repetition, a lot of days of work.
Like any Olympic-level athlete, bobsledders maintain an intense fitness and dietary regimen. But training at an elite level requires specific conditions for bobsledders, things the Jamaican team can't access at home. So Buckner says every minute in Lake Placid is valuable.
We don't have the resources and the ability to train as well as other teams like the US, like Canada, that have the access to the snow and the ice, the colder temperatures, the equipment. But whatever we have, whatever time we get, we make a lot of use of it and we still stay competitive.
The Jamaican team is starting to see promising results, thanks in part to extra support. The North Country Sports Council arranged housing for the team in Saranac Lake. The organization also secured sponsors whose corporate logos are stamped all over the team's sleds. Between races, the team tunes up those sleds in a workshop, making sure they're ready to race. 17-year-old Adonna Johnson glides sandpaper over the runners of her sled to smooth out dents in the metal. She's the youngest member of the team, and she sees her youth as an advantage for the program's future.
It's really good because this is a sport where you can stay in it for a while before you have to retire. So I'm really grateful that I can start at such a young age to progress and just improve overall. Yeah.
Every workout, push training, and race inches the Jamaican team closer to earning its first medal in bobsled. And sled pilot Shane Pitter says they're aiming high.
We want to do well in the Olympics so they could even build another Cool Runnings too. We are the dream team now.
Whether or not they win a medal in the next decade, the Jamaican bobsled team is set out to prove something else, that a tropical nation can compete and win against the sport's biggest powerhouses. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio in Lake Placid.
You can see fantastic photos of the Jamaican bobsled team, past and present, from world-class photographer Nancy Battaglia. It's on our website right now, ncpr.org. We have more news there all the time, ncpr.org. Music today by I Am Snow Angel of Lake Placid and Ben Cato of Jay. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.